Welcome, everybody. With me today is Nazir Afzal QC, who has been the Chief Prosecutor, the advisor to the Welsh Government on the implementation of CEDAW, and is currently the legal consultant to the CPT. Welcome, Nazir, and thank you for giving us your biography to put on our website, because you've had such a full and varied career. We could spend the whole of this interview talking about it. But we're going to concentrate on just a few issues to let everybody know the wonderful work you're doing and how important the CEDAW is to us and to all girls and women. So welcome, and can I start by asking you how addressing the issues regarding police priorities would help women and girls?
We all know that unless we prioritize something, it doesn't get done. Or if it does get done, it gets done after a while when we don't have the resources to do it. As it currently stands, the government sets the strategic policing requirement. And they are things such as child sexual abuse, terrorism, organized crime, cybercrime, serious fraud. And if you were to include what CEDAW is all about, which is protecting women and ensuring equality of women, in that, you would have no excuse, and the authorities, policing and any other agency would have no excuse not to address it as and when they make their decisions, as and when they make their resourcing decisions, as and when they decide what their own priorities should be. It's for government to set the priorities, and if government doesn't do that, unfortunately, Davina, things just don't get done.
Thank you. So in your role as Chief Prosecutor, if CEDAW had already been domesticated, how would it have helped your arguments with the cases that you've been involved in? How would that improve the outcomes for women and girls?
Yeah, well, the government would say that there is already legislation that we have, the Human Rights Act, for example, and the Equalities Act in 2010, which addresses the main principles behind CEDAW. And they would argue, and they have argued, that there's no need to incorporate CEDAW itself into UK legislation. I disagree, and as I think many other people do, because what tends to happen, and what has happened, is that I'm trying to make a moral argument, I'm trying to make an emotional argument, I'm trying to make an argument about somebody's human rights, when in fact, all I should be having to do is make a legal argument. And that makes it rather difficult to persuade a judge or a tribunal or an authority or an agency. If you are saying to them, morally, you should be doing this, ethically, you should be doing this, they respond when you say to them, legally, you should be doing this, because they're then aware of the consequences of not doing it. And I think that's the problem that I've found. You know, again, people are generally good. And so when you make a moral argument or an ethical argument, they will respond accordingly. But that relies upon their goodwill. That relies upon their humanity. What I should be asking them to do is rely upon compliance with the law. And that sometimes has led to situations where judges, for example, have not been able to address a particular issue with the force that it requires, with the robustness it requires, because they have not been able to say that the law is being breached when you do or say something. So I think from my perspective, whilst it hasn't been the main handicap or an obstacle, so to speak, it would have made the life of any lawyer or prosecutor in this country so much easier if we could simply say it's against the law.
In your opinion, do many lawyers, do many of your colleagues know about CEDAW and how it could be used?
It's really disappointing. CEDAW has been around more than 40 years now, and I can probably count on the fingers of my hand lawyers that have mentioned it. I can probably guesstimate that perhaps 1%, maybe 2% of the 150,000 lawyers in this country have some detailed knowledge of it. Some more will have awareness of it, but the vast majority, it will just not register. They will probably have to Google it to try and understand what you're talking about. And that is a significant problem. If the people who are meant to be enforcing the law and ensuring that authorities are held to account have so little awareness and understanding of what CEDAW is, well, you can expect that CEDAW will just not be applied.
So there's a great deal of need for training amongst the judiciary and amongst the legal system, as well as we feel amongst parliamentarians who do not really understand it. Yeah,
Davina, everybody in a position where they have influence over the protection of citizens needs to be more than just aware, they need to be trained. And it has to be appropriate training. So the people on the ground who are dealing with these types of issues on a daily basis need substantial training. But right up to leaders. Leaders need to be aware, because again, if leaders don't set the priorities, those at the ground level, at the grassroots, they won't act upon them. So there has to be training throughout the institution, throughout the organization, in an appropriate way. And it has, at the end of the day, it will have massive benefits to the institution and organization if they were able to undertake that.
Yeah. Nazir, as you're aware, the devolved governments, particularly Scotland and Wales, are considering the implementation of CEDAW, and in Scotland of other UN conventions as well. In your opinion, are there any impediments to the implementation of CEDAW into UK domestic legislation?
As you know, I've worked and continue to work with the Welsh government. I'm very much aware of what the Scottish government are doing. The problem with incorporating into law in the devolved nations is that because it's international law, it requires the UK government to make the decision. As a matter of principle, as a matter of good practice, the fact that the Welsh government and the Scottish government are considering it is great. But it requires the UK government to take the big step in order for it to really happen. And there aren't any impediments. It is simply political will. There are no legal impediments. There are things, for example, that the law doesn't allow us to do. CEDAW, for example, says we should stop the objectification of women. We should tackle misogyny that happens in our society. CEDAW talks about equal pay for equal work and equal opportunities. And none of those things anybody can argue against. Yet, our UK government finds a reason not to implement. And so the reality is that there's no legal obstacles. It is simply a matter of political will. And given that the UK government have committed themselves now to the new Domestic Violence Act, which came into force just this week, it shows that they can do it if they choose to do it.
Thank you so much, Nazir. Is there anything else you would like to say to the people who are supporting us?
I think that firstly, the people who are supporting you should be congratulated for the wiseness of their decision. Secondly, this is going to be the battle that we need to win. As you know, 2 women every week in this country are killed by partners or ex-partners. 10 women take their own lives every week because of domestic abuse. 1 in 4 women suffer domestic abuse. 1 in 5 are sexually assaulted. It is the pandemic that will outlive this pandemic. And therefore, we need to use all the tools at our disposal to protect women. And if we protect women, we protect the wider society. I've heard it said that, for example, if you give CEDAW legal powers, legally enforceable in this country, that will create a hierarchy of rights, that suddenly women's rights will be more important than the rights of Black people or the rights of gay people or straight people, the rights of religious people. Women are the majority in this country. They're not a minority. And I find no fault in us saying that by exerting and ensuring that women get their rights, I can assure you that every other minority will get their rights. So it's not about, say, us, one or the other, or us and them. This is entirely us ensuring that we as a society improve and that we protect the citizens of this country.
Thank you so much, Nazir. Thank you for your support and thank you for your work that you're doing with the CPT. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.